Welcome back to AERO 3170 Aviation Safety, Presentation 1B on Textbook Chapter 1, which is an introduction to commercial aviation safety. The very first acronym that I'd like to introduce you to in this class is USHRI, USHRI. USHRI stands for Ultra Safe High Risk Industry. And commercial aviation is certainly a ultra-safe, high-risk industry. It's ultra-safe because there are very few commercial aviation accidents. However, it's high risk because when an accident does occur in commercial aviation, it typically is a catastrophic accident. What other industries could be considered an ultra-safe, high-risk industry? There are several others. For example, the nuclear power industry is an ultra-safe, high-risk industry. Very few nuclear power accidents, but when one does occur, typically has catastrophic consequences. The same can be said for the chemical industry. So again, why are these industries considered to be USHRI, ultra-safe and high-risk? They accomplish their missions with very few accidents, but the smallest error could have huge consequences. ICAO stands for International Civil Aviation Organization. It's an organization of 192 countries that are involved in international aviation. And ICAO has classified accidents into different types. ICAO classifies accidents as either a major accident, serious accident, an injury accident, or a damage accident. So what's a major accident? A major accident occurs when an aircraft is destroyed, there are multiple fatalities, or there's a fatality coupled with substantial aircraft damage. An accident is classified as a serious accident when it occurs and there's either one fatality without substantial damage to an aircraft, or there was at least one serious injury and an aircraft that is substantially damaged. An injury accident occurs when there is a non-fatal accident with at least one serious injury and without substantial damage to an aircraft. And finally, a damage accident is one that occurs when there is a non-fatal accident, no serious injuries, but a substantial amount of damage to an aircraft. So just how crowded is the airspace over the United States? Well, this picture is a little bit of an exaggeration. But each day in the United States, approximately 50,000 airplanes are flying every day. So what's the difference between a hazard and a risk? A hazard is a condition, any condition, event or circumstance that can cause an injury or damage. A risk is a combination of the severity of the hazard and the probability of injury or damage occurring. This class will include some group discussions, and the first discussion concerns common safety myths. Why aren't these common safety myths true, and what are some examples? The first myth is accidents happen to stupid people. So can you think of an example that demonstrates why this may not be true? And be prepared to talk about it in class? A good example is Air France 4590, the Concorde that hit a piece of debris that fell off an airplane that took off before it, rupturing the fuel tank, causing it to lose power and crash. The crew of Air France 4590 was highly experienced. Another example is the Miracle on the Hudson. Captain Sully Sullenberger, highly experienced pilot, was the captain when the aircraft took off from New York and ran into a flock of geese, losing both engines. Again, Captain Sullenberger was a highly experienced pilot. Another common safety myth is if it isn't broken, don't fix it. You probably heard that before. Can you think of an example that demonstrates why this isn't true? How about Colgan Air Flight 3407, a flight that crashed on approach to landing in Buffalo, New York? The captain reacted inappropriately to stall indications when the aircraft was close to a stall, and that resulted in the deaths of multiple passengers and crew. The NTSB found that fatigue and a lack of training were primary causes of this accident. And up to that time, the airline industry felt that they didn't have a problem managing fatigue. And so there was no need for any kind of special fatigue management program. As a result of the NTSB findings, the NTSB recommended that all passenger airlines implement a fatigue risk management program. Another common safety myth that you may have heard before is if it hasn't been a problem before, then it isn't a problem. Can you think of an example that demonstrates why this isn't true? One good example is Germanwings Flight 9525. The co-pilot of Germanwings Flight 9525 had suffered from depression and suicidal thoughts, but had never disclosed that to his airline. When the captain left the flight deck to use the restroom, the co-pilot locked the captain out and then proceeded to crash the airplane, killing himself and all of the passengers. Up to that time, the airline industry didn't think that there was any kind of a serious problem concerning pilot mental health, since nothing like this had happened before. Another myth is you have been sufficiently trained. What does that mean? Can you think of an example that demonstrates why this may not be true? How about the accident at Tenerife, the worst accident in aviation history? The pilots involved in this accident were highly experienced, highly trained pilots, but the captain of one of the aircraft misunderstood the clearance from air traffic controllers to be a clearance to take off when there was still another aircraft taxiing on the runway. Another myth is safety is our top priority. We hear that all the time. But why may that not be true? Can you think of an example that demonstrates why it's not true? How about the Boeing 737 MAX? It was a brand new aircraft with some brand new technology that was designed to prevent the aircraft from stalling. But as a result of cutting some corners, the aircraft was approved for flight before it was properly tested. So even though Boeing has a very safe record of developing extremely safe aircraft, in this case, they cut some corners in the rush to introduce this airplane, and as a result, compromised safety. Another myth is accidents are impossible to predict. Can you think of an example that demonstrates why this isn't true? Aloha Airlines Flight 243 is a perfect example. The aircraft suffered an explosive decompression and lost a huge section of the fuselage. Miraculously, only one fatality occurred. A flight attendant was sucked out of the airplane as a result, but the flight crew did a tremendous job in landing the aircraft and saving all of the passengers. The NTSB determined that metal fatigue was the cause of this accident, and that it could have been predicted had the proper inspection procedures been implemented. Another common myth is weather is a leading cause of accidents. This is not necessarily true when you look at statistics. These statistics from planecrashinfo.com demonstrate that weather typically only accounts for between 10 and 15% of all fatal accidents by decade. Another common safety myth that you'll hear is there's often a single cause behind an accident, but this is not necessarily true. And you can see that by reading about the ValueJet Flight 592 accident described in the textbook on page 20. The ValueJet 592 accident is a good example of how most aviation accidents, if not all aviation accidents, usually have more than one active cause. There are usually a chain of events or a chain of things that happen leading up to the active cause of an accident. So it's not true that most accidents have just one single cause. This is a myth that you may hear very often. Accidents are acts of God. But what does this statement imply? Well, the statement implies that there really isn't anything that we can do to prevent an accident if it's an act of God. So how would you define safety ethics? Have you ever heard the term, "that was an accident waiting to happen"? What does this statement signify about the lack of safety ethics? If it was an accident waiting to happen, doesn't that say, well, we knew something was going to happen, but we didn't do anything about it? And what does that say about safety ethics? A good example of safety ethics is the Comair pilot Shane Sitz example described on page 12 of the textbook. In class, we'll have a group discussion concerning safety ethics. And specifically, we'll be discussing Comair pilot Shane Sitz. The incident is described in the textbook on page 12. And we'll answer the question, why did the pilot refuse to fly? What happened as a result? And what does this say about safety ethics? In 2007, Comair pilot Shane Sitz refused to fly an aircraft that he thought was unsafe. In the discussion, we'll discuss what was wrong with the aircraft, what happened when he refused to fly the aircraft, and what that said about Comair's safety ethics. We'll also discuss the difference between safety and security. What is the difference between safety and security? Remember, safety is the prevention of unintended negative events. Security is the prevention of intended negative events. So what happened in Tenerife in 1977? Two 747s collided on the runway, resulting in the largest loss of life in aviation history. Close to 600 lives were lost that day. Were there security issues that led to the accident? And what were the safety issues that led to the accident? Well, if you look closely, the first occurrence that led to the accident was a bomb exploding at the aircraft's destination, causing the airport to close down and the aircraft to be diverted to the Tenerife airport. So there was a security issue that led to the accident. Safety issues that led to the accident included very limited visibility at Tenerife, airplanes parked on taxiways, blocking the taxiways, and also miscommunication between the pilot and air traffic control. So the accident at Tenerife is a very good illustration of the differences between security issues and safety issues. What happened at Lakehurst Naval Air Station in 1937? The Hindenburg, which was a German airship, or a blimp, was destroyed by fire, killing 35 people. What happened to the airship industry as a result, and why was this the result? Well, the airship industry was destroyed as a result. The public no longer wanted to fly on these airships. So a single accident led to the destruction of an entire transportation industry. Now later in this class we'll be discussing safety reporting systems, and one is known as the ASRS, Aviation Safety Reporting System. So what is the ASRS? Again, it stands for the Aviation Safety Reporting System, and it is known as a proactive safety program. Proactive in that it attempts to identify hazards and reduce or mitigate those hazards before an accident happens. The agency that administers the ASRS is NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The agency that provides funding for the ASRS is the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. And we'll be learning why this is so in a later class. Well, that's the end of the first presentation on aviation safety. The next presentation will be on textbook chapter 2 concerning the causes of aviation accidents.